Loretta Saunders had just found out she was pregnant, and she was over the moon. Her boyfriend was equally excited. But just as the two were beginning preparations for the new baby, Loretta stopped responding to texts and calls. Her boyfriend was beyond confused. This just didn't make any sense. Maybe Loretta just needed some space to breathe and time to think. But before long, 3 full days had passed by with no word, not a single text. But then, out of the blue, a message popped up into his phone, and it was from Loretta. But she didn't sound like herself. She was asking her boyfriend what her mother's maiden name was, claiming she'd suddenly forgotten. But what an oddly specific thing to forget. And why now of all times? Something was wrong. But it wouldn't be until 2 weeks later when Loretta would finally be found, after she'd been murdered. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If you're new here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts, and I post new true crime documentaries every single week. So if you love classic true crime without a bunch of AI garbage, you've come to the right place. So be sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all of my future videos. It's 100% free. Loretta Saunders was born in Happy Valley Goose Bay, Newfoundland and Labrador, which is in Canada. Her parents, Miriam and Clayton, had children from previous relationships, and Loretta was actually the 5th biological child of the family of 7. The Saunders family was very big. Aside from Loretta's step-siblings, the Saunders household also became home to several Aboriginal children. See, Miriam and Clayton were passionate about fostering children, and they opened their doors to children in need in the community. So the house was always full of people, but Loretta loved every second of it. But while Loretta had a pretty happy upbringing, everything in her life was not sunshine and roses. See, when Loretta was in school, it was alleged that she'd been a victim of both physical and sexual abuse, and this had severe effects on Loretta's mental health. She moved from her hometown to Montreal at a pretty young age, and this abrupt change only caused even more problems for her. We don't know if it was spurred by the sudden move, or if it was more so the abuse she'd been victim to, but soon, Loretta fell into a serious hole of depression. But she was not about to give up her life because of one little hiccup. Despite this incredible setback at such a young age, Loretta pushed herself, finished high school, and was accepted into St. Mary's University in Halifax. There, Loretta studied criminology and dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Being an Indigenous woman herself, Loretta knew that she wanted to dedicate her thesis to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. She wanted to spread the word about this, which was more than just a thesis topic. Loretta herself had been through many ups and downs in her own life for being Indigenous, and she made it her life mission to bring the misfortunes of Indigenous women and girls to light. She wanted to make a change, and she dedicated her life to making the lives of others better. Loretta was also in a relationship with a man named Yalcin, who was originally from Turkey. They'd been together for almost 3 years, and at the time of the case, Loretta got that unexpected yet wonderful surprise. She was pregnant with Yalcin's child. Rather than be terrified by this news, both Loretta and Yalcin were beyond excited. While this would obviously be a pretty massive change for them both, neither one saw this as anything but a blessing. Now, since Loretta and Yalcin were living together, Loretta's apartment was empty and no one was using it. Now, this may sound like an odd thing to mention, but the thing is, around this same time, Loretta had found out that the university would not approve her honors thesis topic of the missing and endangered women. This threw a kink in her plans, as they were now withholding funding for her research. But desperate to prove her point and let her fellow Indigenous women's voices be heard, Loretta made a new plan. She decided to rent out her empty apartment and use the money to fund the research into her thesis project. So she found a couple to rent her apartment to, and that was that. Things were going great, until they weren't. February 14th of 2014 rolled around, and it was Valentine's Day. Yalcin and Loretta planned to spend most of the day together, but there was one problem. Loretta had up and vanished, and now she wasn't answering her phone. Yalcin tried calling her, texting her, and leaving her voicemails, but everything went unread, and there was no response. Yalcin had no choice but to call Loretta's sister Delilah and ask her if she'd seen Loretta around. During this time, Yalcin received a very odd message, and it was from Loretta. Well, sort of. It came from Loretta's phone number, but The message sounded odd, and it didn't sound like something Loretta would do or say. The text read, quote, "I'm so stressed that I can't even remember my own mother's maiden name." The thing is, Loretta and her mother were very close. She knew good and well what her mother's maiden name was, and this was not something she would just forget. Other texts also showed that Loretta had somehow locked herself out of all of her online banking apps. Now this seemed really weird to Yalchin. Loretta wasn't the type of person to forget important things like this. She was a responsible young woman who didn't usually forget her bank passwords and stuff like that. Another text said that Loretta was out meeting an unnamed friend. And again, Yalchin thought that these texts were bizarre because Loretta would always tell everyone where she was going and who she was with. Loretta's family also tried to contact her, but to no avail. No one had seen her, and if you remember, she was also pregnant. She could be in danger and might need help for all anyone knew, and finally, after 3 long days of not hearing from her, 26-year-old Loretta Saunders was reported missing. Her car, a 2000 Toyota Celica, was also nowhere to be seen. So this was what the police started their search with. The investigators wanted to find the last place Loretta could have gone to, and they would start their investigation from there. Luckily, they didn't have to look for too long. It turned out that Loretta had an important errand to run on the day that she went radio silent. She was due to make a trip to her apartments to pay a visit to her tenants because they hadn't paid their rent yet. The detectives were interested in this piece of information, but before they made their way to Loretta's apartment, they asked Yalchin some questions. According to Yalchin, Loretta had a busy day on Friday, February 13th, and the first order of business was to go to her apartment to collect the rent from her tenants, Blake Leggett and Victoria Henberry. Eerily enough, she wasn't seen or heard from after making her way to the apartment. So this immediately put the investigators on edge, and they decided to go to Loretta's apartment in Halifax. When the police knocked on the apartment door, they were expecting the tenants to open it, but strangely enough, no one was home. When the officers gained access to the apartment, what stood out to them the most, beside the apartment being quite clean and tidy, was that it was eerily quiet. Nothing was out of place to suggest that a struggle had taken place, and when the investigators asked around, they got to know the reason behind the tenant's absence. The couple claimed to be away for Valentine's break, and no one had seen them since. The next step for the detectives was to check the CCTV cameras, and luckily there was one camera at the entrance of the apartment building. The interesting thing about it was that the camera caught anyone and everyone who walked in and out of the apartment through the main entrance. This was the only point of entry and exit for people living in the apartment, so movements were always caught by surveillance cameras. So that was what the investigators did, along with checking the rest of the cameras and back exits too. They wanted to see when Loretta got to the apartment complex and if she ever made it out or not. They went through the surveillance footage of the day when Loretta visited the tenants, and sure enough, she was seen entering the apartment complex a little before 11 a.m. on Friday the 13th. But hours had gone by, and police sifted through footage after footage, but they didn't ever see Loretta leaving, not from the main entrance and not from any of the other places. This was quite alarming. Loretta did enter the apartment, but she was never seen leaving. So the investigators were certain that something happened in that apartment that prevented Loretta from leaving. At least, not alive. While going through the footage, the detectives managed to see someone leaving the apartment complex, not once, but several times. It was not Loretta, but her tenants, and what the police saw in their hands filled them with dread. See, on the day that Loretta went missing, around 2:30 p.m., Victoria and Blake were seen exiting the elevator carrying a large bag with them. It looked like a hockey bag, and the man Blake was having a hard time carrying it. Once he took the bag outside, presumably to his car, he was seen walking back in and going back up to the apartment. This time, at around 3 p.m., Blake was seen again, and again with more bags. Then he went up again, and this was the last time he made the trip from their apartment to the parking lot. And this time he came down and he was with Victoria. But still, there was no sign of Loretta. So the investigators had this very terrifying inkling that Loretta did go to the apartment, but sadly, she may have never left. But the big question still remained, why? Why would two strangers attack Loretta? And more importantly, where was this mysterious bag now? To find answers, the detectives needed to track down Loretta's tenants. Luckily, the investigators were able to figure out that Loretta's cards were still active, and lo and behold, there was activity on them. The police found out that Loretta's cards had been used at a store at around 5 p.m. on February the 13th, the same day Loretta went missing. When the investigators reviewed the footage from the store, they found Loretta's Toyota parked outside the store. And when they reviewed the footage from the store exit, they saw none other than Victoria, one of the tenants, leaving the store with her purchased goods. Next, the detectives traced the car's movement to a local Tim Hortons, which was about 10 miles from Loretta's apartment. The cameras inside and outside the drive-thru were able to identify Victoria wearing the same blue jacket as in the camera footage in the apartment and the store. The cameras inside the drive-thru, where the cashier was, also saw a bald man in the driver's seat, and he was identified as Blake. So Victoria and Blake were clearly using Loretta's car and her cards to buy snacks and coffee, and Loretta was still nowhere to be seen. If you add the eerie footage of Blake carrying a bunch of heavy bags from the apartment, then I think you can guess where this was going. The Halifax Police Department immediately reported Loretta's car as stolen, and they were waiting for the tenant's next move. Well, within 5 days, on February 18th, the Halifax police were contacted by the Harrow Police Department, and they had some good news for them. The Harrow PD was able to track down Loretta's stolen car, and it was currently at a house in Harrow, Ontario. This was enough reason to arrest Victoria and Blake, and that was exactly what was done. Now, the Halifax police needed answers, and they needed them fast, because it had been days since anyone had heard from Loretta. And if they were going to bring her home alive, they needed to act quickly. As the couple was arrested and in custody, the investigators found some interesting information on Blake and Victoria. They both had run-ins with the law. Blake was due to appear in court in Calgary for unrelated charges, while Victoria was reported for threatening someone in Halifax. So you can already tell they're not star citizens. But anyway, the detectives first searched Victoria and Blake, and they found Loretta's phone and bank cards in the possession of the couple. This only heightened the police suspicion even more. The investigators questioned Blake and Victoria, but their lips were sealed. They maintained that they didn't know where Loretta was, and they hadn't seen her for days. When asked about how they managed to get a hold of Loretta's car, Blake admitted that Loretta had sold it to him. But this didn't make any sense. Loretta used her car to go to university and run errands. She had no plans of selling the car. Even Loretta's boyfriend, Yelchin, was dumbfounded when he heard this. Everyone knew Blake was lying. Well, since the couple was being uncooperative, the police had no choice but to look through Blake's phone, and that was when they found something in the gallery. It was a video, recorded a couple days before Loretta went missing, and when the investigators played it, they were gobsmacked.
This is why Victoria should not drink.
You really think I don't want to be with you?
When I'm sober? And if you
stupid?
Why? What have I done?
You can't even say that you really want to kill Loretta. You said that you want to kill her earlier.
When did I say that?
You're a liar. You're the one who said.
You
just
just said.
The video showed a drunken Victoria and Blake arguing. In the video, Victoria goes on and on about Blake wanting to end Loretta's life. When Blake tries to deny it in the video, Victoria demands that he stop lying. Now, this video could be seen as drunken word vomit, but the detectives didn't think so. It was too specific. They weren't just talking about the weather, they were specifically talking about ending Loretta's life, and now she was missing for a week at this point. The whole thing it seemed too perfect. How often does a criminal get arrested only for evidence of their crime to be found right on their phone? Well, admittedly, probably more often than many of us realize, but this particular situation, it was just insane. The investigators decided to use this video as bait to crack Victoria, and luckily it worked. When Victoria was shown the video, she couldn't keep the facade up anymore, and she admitted to something really dark. She confessed to the police that Blake had suffocated Loretta in her own apartment on February 13th, subsequently taking her life. The interrogation room was silent after Victoria's confession. What the investigators and everyone was dreading came through. It was also confirmed that that heavy hockey bag didn't contain any sports gear. As we all feared, Loretta was inside that bag. But the thing was, according to Victoria, Loretta was still inside that bag. This meant that now police had to find it. For this, they also took help from Victoria, and she finally revealed the location where the two had dumped that bag. Victoria led the investigators to the Trans-Canada Highway near Salisbury, New Brunswick, in Canada. and on the side of the road, the police discovered the discarded hockey bag. The same hockey bag that was carried by Blake in the footage. When the officers opened the bag, sure enough, Loretta was inside. As they examined the state of her body, the details that Victoria had shared with the investigators turned out to be true. Someone had used their bare hands to end Loretta's life. The missing person search for Loretta was brought to a tragic end. But now, police still had to gather enough evidence to convict the couple for what they had done. And as we all know, this is often much easier said than done. Even though Victoria sort of admitted to being involved with Blake in Loretta's murder, the couple surprisingly pleaded not guilty. A judge announced that they'd be tried together in Loretta's murder trial. But before the trial began, both Blake and Victoria changed their pleas to guilty. They knew that the jig was up, and they both decided to confess. According to Blake and Victoria, Loretta arrived at her apartment at 11 a.m. and had no plans on leaving until she got what she was owed from Victoria and Blake. According to the couple, they owed Victoria somewhere between $400 and $600, but they had no plans to pay her. Why? Well, I seriously don't know. Sometimes tenants run into hard times and just don't have the money. But these guys, from the sound of it, just didn't want to pay for whatever reason. So Blake and Victoria decided that they would rather do the unthinkable than pay Loretta, which is just insane. To think that Loretta lost her life for rightfully asking for money from her tenants is absolutely harrowing. This could not have possibly gone worse, and it's literally every renter's worst nightmare come to life. But according to the couple, while Loretta was sitting in a chair, Blake came up behind her, and that was when the struggle started. Loretta fought with everything in her. Despite her small size, Loretta put up one heck of a fight, but unfortunately, Blake gained the upper hand, and in a cruel turn of events, he ended Loretta's life using plastic bags as well as his bare hands. Blake then loaded Loretta's body into a large hockey bag, and then put the bag in none other than Loretta's own car. This was a devastating and horrifying moment for everyone, because if you remember, the police were going through CCTV footage and trying to track the car's movement. All this time, while Blake and Victoria were buying things at stores and Tim Hortons with Loretta's cards, Loretta was in the trunk of that car, lifeless and cold. This footage, in hindsight, is just chilling. These despicable outlaws had the nerve to not pay Loretta what she was owed, end her life, spend her money, drive her car to Harrow, and even pretend to be Loretta, texting her family and asking for sensitive bank security details. The weird texts Yalchin received were obviously not Loretta's doing. It was all Victoria and Blake's plan to hide their awful crime while trying to get their dirty hands on Loretta's money, who had since lost her life. Everything about this case is just infuriating and extremely sad. In the end, Blake Leggett was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years, whereas Victoria Henbury was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 10 years for second-degree murder. Now, when you hear these sentences, you might think, well, okay, so justice was served. But you have to remember, Loretta was pregnant. So these disgusting people took not just one life, but two. And one of them is only being forced to spend 10 years behind bars before she'll be eligible for release. And this is sickening. Loretta will never get a chance to meet her baby, finish her thesis that she was so passionate about, or start a life with Yalchin. Victoria and Blake took everything from Loretta, all because they didn't want to pay her a few $100s. It's tragedy on top of tragedy. Loretta, just like the women she was researching for her thesis, was an Indigenous woman. Because of her Inuk heritage, her investigation was put on the back burner. Even though the Halifax police were stealthy in the beginning, when they eventually found out that Loretta was Inuk, the investigation all of a sudden suddenly slowed down in pace. Another heartbreaking yet infuriating aspect of Loretta's case was the treatment the family received, all because of their heritage. See, after Loretta's tragic end, her family was offered counseling on dealing with grief. According to Loretta's sister, Delilah, the court-appointed grief counselor made her feel uncomfortable and even tried making passes at her. This is literally the last thing any grieving woman wants to go through, but this is a recurring trend for these women. I don't know what it is with people, but the second they find out someone is a person who they deem to be a second-class citizen, it's like all respect goes out the window, and they're treated like toys or animals. If you thought this was bad enough, well, Victoria, the accomplice in Loretta's murder, also made a comeback in a very infuriating way. See, she claimed that she also had indigenous ancestors on her mom's side, and that she deserved sympathy too. Loretta's family was taken aback by Victoria's behavior. All she was trying to do was save herself and reach out to several indigenous women's welfare centers to try to get her out of prison because she was, quote, indigenous too. Well, Victoria's little plan soon turned to dust when everyone turned their backs on her. The public hated her even more, and she was banned from ever accessing indigenous services again, and thankfully so. She also applied to withdraw her guilty plea in 2017, but it was eventually denied, so there's that. But as a result of Loretta's passing, a campaign was born called #MINext. It was started in 2014, and it was actually Loretta's cousin, Holly Jarrett, who started this project to raise the victim's family's voice following Loretta's abrupt and senseless passing. This campaign led to a domino effect, and it subsequently opened up an inquiry into the murdered and missing indigenous women and girls in 2015. The inquiry officially began in 2017 and lasted about 2 years, in which close to 3,000 people related to the MMIWG were interviewed. The final report was released in 2019. It contained over 200 calls for justice directed at governments, institutions, social service providers, industries, and all Canadians. Loretta's dream, even after her passing, had come true. She made a difference in all of these women's cases. Delilah also started a blog called A Homicide Survivor's Journey Through Grief and became a social justice activist, taking her late sister's legacy forward and spreading the word about MMIWG in schools, public events, and other platforms. Loretta's thesis professor, Dr. Daryl LaRoe, as well as the Community Foundation of Nova Scotia, helped to set up the Loretta Saunders Community Scholarship in 2014 as a way to honor and remember Loretta and what she did in her life. Loretta's murder was extremely hard on her family, as well as on the community. And it also showed the double standards of law enforcement agencies in how they handled Loretta's case. I just hope that as time passes by, Loretta's case will continue to raise awareness about the injustice that so many Indigenous women face in places like Canada and across the world for that matter. It's so incredibly heartbreaking that in trying to raise awareness for the cause, Loretta herself became yet another victim. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Heather G and Shirley Graff Allen. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you'll gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public. And it's a great way to support the channel and help out, and I appreciate all of you guys that have decided to do that. If you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video, or find the link down in the description. And don't forget, True Crime Stories t-shirts are also now available, so you can grab one of those from a link down in the description as well. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered. And don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free, and it just keeps you up to date with all my future cases. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.